Good morning. Are we awake? Are we on the air? Yes, live? Applause. Very unnecessary, but very flattering. I'm Matt Schechter. It's my great privilege to serve as CEO of Advertising Week, and welcome to day 432. And this is the 1126th seminar of Advertising Week 11. Each year, we start from scratch to build a program that really delivers for you. And if you look across the whole broad spectrum of the agenda, you see that there's no theme. And that's very much by design. So we had Mitch Barnes from Nielsen on earlier talking about, the future of measurement and data and metrics. And then we had Jessica Alba here talking about something else. And we had a dinner with Dave Grohl. And we had a concert with Outkast. And, it's really broad and very much by design. Probably the thing we take the most pride in is to put together really interesting combinations of people that you would be unlikely to see ever or anywhere else. I suppose that's two ways of saying the same thing. And this one we were really, really excited about because it brought together some of the very, very smartest folks we know from all over the world. So I'm particularly thrilled to have my partner, the chair of our advisory council for Advertising Week Europe over in London, Kathleen Saxton, on this one. And equally thrilled to have Lynda Sawyer, who served as our chair here for so many years of Advertising Week here in America. And a real all-star group. Coleen's been on our board. Lynda, I know forever. So this is just a fantastic group. And who could handle a group like this, we thought? Because this group was actually built first before the moderator. And we thought that there was only one person who could handle this, and that's our dear friend, Jonathan Perelman from BuzzFeed. We know Jonathan a long time. He's super smart. I hope you'll show everyone your socks, because I know you have good socks on. This will be terrific. You will leave inspired, and you will go back to work more innovative after seeing this one, guaranteed. Thanks, everybody.
Well, thank you, Matt. Be careful. There's not a lot of room up here, so just be careful. Thank you. Henry Kissinger was once introduced as a man who needs no introduction, and he got up there and he said, "I might not need one, but I sure do like one." Matt, thank you for that introduction. Not sure where we go from there, but welcome, everybody, to a really cool and unique event that we have. This is not about programmatic. It's not about ROI. It's not about ad units. It's not about any of that really amazing, wonderful stuff that we do every day. Something almost more important, though. It's about, we're going to get into a little bit of the psychology and talk about innovation and inspiration, where it comes from, how you find it, how you build it, encourage it in others. And so we do have an incredible group here. Really excited, and I will show my socks for the first time right now. Yeah. You can follow me on Twitter, and my socks do tweet as well. So anyway. So I'm going to do a quick introductions, and then we're going to get into it. So let's go. Kuehn, who is the president of client leadership at MediaVest, and certainly a change agent throughout her career and at MediaVest. Lynda Clarizio is the president of U.S. media at Nielsen, longtime AOL, who was actually one of the chief architects of the AOL Time Warner merger, and there's a lot of learnings from that we will get to. Kathleen Saxton, who Matt introduced, the founder of Lighthouse Company, one of the leading headhunting firms, talent management firms, based out of the UK, but big presence in the US, is also a psychotherapist, which is not that, I've known Kathleen for a long time, it is not that different from what she does in her day job, which is remarkable. So when you speak to her, keep that in mind. Susan Smith-Ellis is the CMO of Getty Images, and really lives at the intersection of disruptive ideas, and she brought props.
I do. Hold your breath.
Which is cool.
Yeah, we can win them.
And Lynda Sawyer is the North American CEO of Deutsch. Just celebrated 25 years at Deutsch, which is incredible.
Woo!
Congratulations. And so, finding inspiration after 25 years, we've got a lot to get into. Yeah, tiring. Yeah, that is true. I'm Jonathan Perelman, the Vice President of BuzzFeed Motion Pictures. And so when Matt asked me to moderate this panel, I first thought, inspiration, innovation, we all know what that means sort of intuitively, but I looked it up on Google, not technically a dictionary, but, and what inspiration came back with is the process of being mentally stimulated to do or feel something, especially something creative. And innovation was a new method, idea, or product. So I don't know if those two things are, if you can decouple them, if they're together, can you have one and not the other? But I think the first question is very simple, yet somewhat profound, is where do you find it? Inspiration, where do you find it? Is it a place you go to? Is it a mindset? Where does it happen? Kathleen, why don't we start with you?
Okay, so well, technically I find it in the bath always, and on a personal level I get most inspired when I'm probably lying horizontally on a beach or in the bath. But for me it tends to be when there's something missing, something isn't working, something in an industry or a sector where there's a frustration for consumers or individuals or even myself. And my sense is, well, if it doesn't exist or it's not working, let's find another way, let's find a better way to make something work. And it's whether or not you have got the energy to do that and you've got the time and space to do that. But, I do believe, I'm an ex-Archier, but I do believe nothing's impossible. And I do think if you're that driven to fix something, that can be an incredibly motivating place to start.
In the bath. Coleen, do you find it in a physical location? Do you find it in your head? Does it come when you're walking down the street?
Yep. I'd say all the above, but I don't take enough baths. I'll have to try that.
Apparently.
But I would say that I get inspiration from different perspectives, and that could be talking to different people, a 10-year-old versus an 82-year-old. Could be a different location. You and I were talking about the differences between Los Angeles and New York. It could be, taking a walk. I do find I feel more creative when I'm slowing down a little bit and taking a walk and admiring, God's creations and nature. So
yeah, slowing down is a really difficult thing to do, but incredibly powerful. Lynda, how about you? Where do you find it?
I'm inspired by people who have their own voice, who have their own point of view, and who are not afraid to put that forward, and not afraid to drive change, not afraid to take no for an answer. And that's a really hard thing to do. It's a hard thing to do in our industry, and that inspires me. I brought this quote, so if you let me read this quote, because we were thinking about this panel from Steve Jobs, and I actually find this inspirational. It's from his Stanford commencement speech in 2005, and I think a lot of you have heard it, but I think about this periodically. He said, "Don't be trapped by dogma, which is living with the results of other people's thinking. Don't let the noise of others' opinions drown out your own inner voice, and most important, have the courage to follow your heart and intuition." And that inspires me.
Certainly an inspiring man, an inspiring quote, who came up with a lot of innovation.
Yep.
So, Lynda, 25 years, where do you cultivate it? Where does it come from?
I think even going back to 25 years ago to today, Deutsch, one of the things that I think has been pretty magical is that we're such a culture of accountability and collaboration, and that we've always had a very simple view that our role is less even about advertising, it's more business solutions. So, I think what inspires me is the ability to bring together the brightest minds and feed off one another. And when you give people a lot of, clarity of purpose, being, finding those best business solutions, but then liberate them to go do it in the best way they can do it. And also, obviously, with the fragmentation of media and technology and all these things, in order to deliver to that very simple goal, you have to innovate. So I think it's, working with really bright minds, collaborating, and I personally get inspiration on other people's successes. So that, I thrive on that. So that personally is very inspiring for me.
Yeah. Susan, I'm curious, we've heard some Kathleen finds it, in the bathtub or lying on the beach. Others are finding it from other people. Is it a combination for you of a sort of solo experience with other people? You ran Red for a long time. How do you balance between finding it with others and yourself?
Well, so, I actually agree with Lynda. I think for me, I really do thrive on collaboration and on being around people, because I think you only know what you know, and so being around other people, those synapses happen that you might not have had happen if you hadn't had new incoming info. And I also think it's not, we sometimes get in a comfort zone of wanting to be around people that are like us. I think it's much more stimulating and more inspiring to be around people that have lots of different backgrounds, that bring a lot of different things to the table. And so, but the other thing for me is I'm a very visual person, which is probably why I'm at Getty Images.
Makes sense.
But so I get, from a personal point of view, when I'm not in a collaborative mode, it's really from things that I see. It's from imagery, it's from film, it's from art, museums, architecture, just being out in the world, because that makes you think about not the task at hand, but it's so inspiring that I think it sort of frees your mind.
So a lot of these are positive, right? Finding inspiration through positive aspects, elements, experiences. Coleen, is there a way that something negative can actually prove as inspirational, more or less powerful?
Absolutely. It's sort of like Kathleen's saying, whether it's problem solving or, I think there's a little bit of a fixer in all of us. You see something and you want to make it better, and you want to address a gap that exists, whether it's for your child or a consumer. But I think it's definitely from what's missing and what's broken that you can be inspired to create something better.
Lynda, positive, negative?
I don't know about negative, but I think a little bit of paranoia is a really good thing to driving inspiration and innovation. Jim Collins had this book called Great by Choice, and he talked about productive paranoia as being something that's important to driving innovation. And I think that's true with my team at Nielsen. I like them to worry. I want to have my team worry. I don't want them to think.
Are any of you here today from Nielsen? I'm not kidding, actually.
Yes, there are some people from Nielsen.
Are you worried?
They are now. They are now.
It is, but it is important to worry, to constantly be thinking, about this changing media environment in which we live, and we don't know all the answers, but we have to be ahead of our clients. We have to be ahead of our consumers. We have to be driving those breakthrough solutions, and that's a hard thing to do. It's a hard thing to do in a big company, and to be really successful as a leader, you have to sort of cultivate that productive paranoia to lead to innovation.
Yeah, I guess I'd add to that too, and I'd say it's fairly easy and straightforward to find something that's missing or broken and fix it. I think in working with some of our large clients who are market leaders, they actually have something that's working, and they have to be brave enough to break it to create their next new thing to sustain their leadership position. And I think that does require courage and bravery. So
I'm really good at worrying, so maybe. No. Lynda, after 25 years, are you still worried, or is it the worry different? Do you find that the negative or that paranoia motivates you in different ways than success?
Yeah, I think the one nice thing about working for so many years is that you do develop sort of a maturity and calm about challenges, and that I absolutely, when it doesn't matter the complexity or the scariness of the challenge, it's sort of like that, to me, in some strange way, gets very inspirational on it's probably not going to be the obvious solution, and we're probably going to have to come at it from very different ways. And I often find that it births some of the best thing. And in retrospect, you say, it's almost really good that happened, and we probably wouldn't have come to that. So You know, I think one of my roles is to keep that calm and kind of be focused on the solution rather than worrying. I mean, I'm not a big worrier, but because I find that, you know, if you just stick it through and you have a lot of focus, you'll get there.
Kathleen, I'm going to keep going back to the fact that you are a psychotherapist. You studied it, you have a degree in it, you are doing it. Almost, you know, from a mental perspective, do you find, you know, obviously there are very strict HIPAA laws, we wouldn't want to get involved in that, but people you see, people you talk to, either as a psychotherapist or as in your day job, are they motivated? Are they inspired by big challenges, or is it just a box they want to check? Do you find that people respond differently?
Depends what state of mind they're in. I think if they're in a kind of severely depressed state, you have lots of myopic thinking, so it's very difficult for them to see anything outside of what's happening right now. But if you're thinking about someone, let's say a chief executive of a company who is having major challenges, or they've decided they don't particularly like it, but they're working through some big challenges and issues, sometimes pulling them back to look at the bigger scope and the more global context of something can take them out of the weeds and give them a chance to breathe. But I think the point about having space, whether that's physical or mental, to actually have some time to come away from the urgency, even if it's just an hour or two out of the office, whether it's walking or whether it's just taking some time out, which often in a moment of crisis you feel is the very last thing you can do. But actually, unless you allow some space for some new light to come in through the window, if you like, it's very difficult to come out of the crisis point. So you have to try and create some space with them, for them, to allow them to see that, of course, there is another story that can be told. It's not just the crisis right now.
Yeah. Susan, I'm interested in your take, having spent a long time at Red, where there were significant challenges that you were trying to overcome. How did you find, you know, try and find solutions to some of the world's biggest crises?
Well, so I think when you do something like Red, so it was a very complicated libretto, right? We raised money for the Global Fund to fight AIDS, malaria, and tuberculosis. Our brief was only AIDS, and it was only specifically really ARVs. And we partnered with other brands, Starbucks and Nike and Apple and so on. And so in the beginning, trying to explain that or understand it or even figure out how do we make it so that all of you would want to be engaged, a lot of that was working through the complexity to make it very simple, which I think a lot of actually brilliant companies and brands do, is that they take things that are very complicated and they make them simple. So we reduced it all down really to buy Red, save lives. And the idea there was that's pretty simple. And if you want to know more, you could go deeper and deeper and deeper, but you could get to people on a very simple level. And that really came about from a lot of collaboration. And part of that collaboration, and I'm going to get on a little bit of a soapbox here, but I think technology is wonderful. But I think the downside of technology is that we spend too much time in front of screens. And I think one of the things that I learned and experienced at Red is we sat in an open plan, and we could hear each other and talk and be much more engaged physically. And I do think there's something about that face-to-face collaboration, and you can't always do it, but when you can, a lot of energy comes from that, and I think a lot of good ideas.
Yeah. I love that idea of simplicity. I think we overcomplicate
everything
all the time. I'm going to ask in the back. It's a little bit of a video to view. It's a bit of shameless self-promotion. It's a piece that BuzzFeed did with GE, but I think it speaks to a lot of what we're talking about. If we could roll the video, please.
Have you ever been driving somewhere and suddenly realized that you were thinking some strange thought, like what birthday balloons smell like? Maybe remembering a note that you wrote to
the audio is working perfectly. The video is not playing. So we're not going to watch it. But trust me, it's great. It's something we did. Oh, okay. Okay, great. Can we play it from the beginning again? We are going to watch it. Just kidding.
Maybe remembering
with audio. So we have the video. We have the movement, the motion pictures, and the audio. We just have to combine them together. If we could try it one more time.
Have you ever been driving somewhere and suddenly realized that you were thinking some strange thought, like what birthday balloons smell like? Maybe remembering a note that you wrote to your 5th grade pen pal, or something that you wish you had said earlier on in the day. Basically, do you ever have a wandering mind? It can kind of feel like the opposite of structured thought, as if your brain's GPS is on the fritz, just taking turns at random. And it can be particularly frustrating when you're trying to focus on a problem or an idea, and 2 minutes later you catch yourself wondering what it's like to be a cloud or who invented pockets. But if you search around a bit, you start hearing stories like this one. Amy Baxter, a doctor, spent years looking for ways to use cold temperatures to help kids get through the pain of vaccinations. Coming home after an all-night shift, she noticed that her vibrating steering wheel made her hands numb. And suddenly she realized that if you combined vibration and cold together, you could ease the pain of a shot. And afterwards, she said, after an overnight shift, your mind is expansive. Connections are made that wouldn't otherwise happen. She basically gave credit to the fact that she was tired. In the history of ideas, this pattern is familiar. Intense thinking over a long period of time with no clear results, and then in a single moment, when the mind's relaxed and drifting, a perfect solution just pops in. Sometimes it can happen in a bathtub. That's when Archimedes figured out how to measure density using displaced water. Or it can happen relaxing under a tree. That's when Sir Isaac Newton observed that famous falling apple and had a sudden understanding of gravitational force. Even Albert Einstein once asked, "Why is it I always get my best ideas while shaving?" And this can seem all a bit accidental, hard to recreate. After all, how many times can you shave in a day? But it turns out that many creative people actively search for ways to get their brains into that wandering state. The inventor Thomas Edison would try to catch his mind in hypnagogia, that weird place between wakefulness and sleep. He would fall asleep in a chair, holding steel ball bearings in his hands. At the moment that he drifted off to sleep, the balls would hit the floor and he would wake up, sometimes with an answer to a nagging question. Some inventors use transcendental meditation. Others go on long bike rides or wander the halls of a museum. And sometimes the key might be something as simple as procrastinating, cleaning a bathroom, or reorganizing books. In fact, it's been shown that many successful artists and scientists procrastinate on purpose. They don't do it aimlessly, though. They put off making something because they understand the process, that things have to stew in your mind for a bit before the connections can be made. All of this might seem a little time-consuming and messy, not the step-by-step logical thought process we usually equate with genius. But some of the ingredients of genius might be just that, time and messiness. So the next time you catch yourself thinking about how balloons smell or how rainbows always seem so far away, don't beat yourself up. You might just be moments away from wandering into the next great idea.
So, thank you, whoever set that up, and thank you for indulging me and showing a little bit of that. But I thought it made a lot of sense, especially when we think about innovation and inspiring it across organizations, right? Because it's not just you, it's the whole organization that you are working with, running, dealing with. And so, Susan, I'm curious from your perspective, how, as CMO of Getty, do you create innovation across a large entity?
Well, so I mean, I think I'm in some ways I have an easy job. Don't tell anybody at Getty Images that. Because what we have, what we take to market is imagery, is incredible. You know, the work of these great photojournalists and the work of photographers and contributors. So the product in and of itself is pretty inspirational. But I think the other piece that we all need to have is you can have a mission, and our mission is obviously to keep our business going and build it and make it better and better and burnish it. But you need a vision. You need to have a vision, and I think that the difference between a mission and a vision is inspirational. A vision is sort of where are you going, not what is the task at hand. And so I try to talk to my team about let's not get to where we think we ought to be. Let's think about where do we want to be down the road? Where do we want to be in 4 or 5 years or 10 years? What kind of a company do we want to be? What kind of a reputation do we want to have? And I think keeping the idea of what is the mission. So our ultimate mission is we put images out there that really move the world, is images that move the world. So having that bigger mission makes the tasks that you do feel more important and I think more exciting. I mean, I get up every day and I'm excited to go to work because there's a bigger view of what we do.
Yeah. I'm shameless plug for someone else at this point. I'm reading a new book by Eric Schmidt and Jonathan Rosenberg, How Google Works, and according to Kindle, I'm only 19% of the way in. But the first part is really all about culture, and that you can't manufacture it. It has to be there, and you have to let it run. Coleen, I'm curious, in an organization like Stark, like how do you grab that? How do you get that culture, understand it, have everybody marching to the beat of the same drummer?
Yep. You're right. We do have a large organization. It's, MediaVest alone is close to 1,000. But I think, Lynda, you talked about it, putting bright minds together and seeing what happens, sort of mash up. So we'll have speed dating sessions across the company in terms of where you get to learn a little bit about what the other person is doing. And you may have known what they're doing. Everyone knows what search is, but you don't know what they're doing lately in search or for a particular client, and it gives you stimulus and a catalyst for other things. And then I think the other thing we really look to do is what we call outspiration. And I think it is, and I think you talked about it, Kathleen, it's really important to take field trips and get out of the office. And, I'll even tell people, you should take a different way to work once a week, and you'll just see something new, see something different. And so, and another thing we do is we create office hours for some of our Center of Excellence leads. And it's not necessarily to problem solve, it can be for that, but it's a time and space sort of carved out where people can just show up and spitball ideas. And I think that's when you put those great minds together and allow the space for it, I think then that's when the magic happens.
Yeah, perspective.
Yeah.
Perspective. Keep going back to that. Lynda, I'm curious, leading lots of really amazing creative people, how do you keep that innovation going with people that's what they do?
Yeah. Well, I think a lot of it, so much we're in a people business ultimately. And so, I think that we've taken painful discretion in our hiring in terms of finding people that are really going to fit in the culture. And, we've used these set of words for a very long time: leaner, meaner, faster, smarter. And what I think has been successful about that, and people sort of embodying that, is that no matter how big we get, there is a speed and agility and nimbleness and scrappiness that sort of takes away from the hierarchy of traditional structure. Even though in many ways we do have a traditional structure, we work in a very horizontal way, and it's very inclusive. And I think, we also talk about our people as like big brains, big hearts, and 2% off center. And, and it really, and it's very diverse in terms of what our people look like, feel like, but there is that spirit, and I think that you have to kind of cultivate that. And we call, our employees, we call them Deutschers. Our people are branded, so it really goes through the whole organization.
Yeah. Focused on the people.
It's so critical, though, when you're hiring into a culture, and I think that people sometimes forget. We work with businesses right across from Facebook to JWT to NBC, everywhere across the piece. And I think that if the culture is known to be that way, that you are either a Deutscher or you're not, as an example, it can be incredibly motivating to hire somebody into that business and to get it right, and to know actually in an interview if someone's going to make it and be successful. What we find difficult, and we have a number of these agencies, particularly in the UK at the moment, there are a couple of agencies that I really think culturally have lost their way. They don't have a strong leader, they don't have a real sense of purpose, and I think purpose and people wanting to feel that they are progressing, and this sense that legacy is more important than currency, I think is really becoming quite prevalent now for people. You want to feel you're on a mission to something with somebody, and if that's missing as a headhunter, I can tell you it's very difficult to hire people into those businesses because they just don't feel compelled to belong there. And I think as leaders we have to think about that when we're running companies.
I mean, at Nielsen, we're really evolving and changing our culture, which is a little different from what you were talking about. And to create a culture of change and innovation, I think first you have to make people feel really comfortable with uncertainty. You have to make them feel comfortable that they're not going to know all the answers, that they need to be willing to embrace change, to take risks, to ask the hard questions. And I think you can do that as a leader with your team. And how do I create an environment like that? I mean, I try to make people feel uncomfortable. I do. I don't like when people tell me an answer.
Paranoid and uncomfortable.
I don't want you to think that's bad. I think it's good.
No,
I think that I don't like it when people come to me and give me just sort of the expected answer. I don't like that, to tell me what I want to hear. That's not a good answer. So I try to push people to really get them to think, and to think about a different way of doing things. We have a lot of small team meetings. We do a lot of town halls. We communicate. And we try to create this environment of trust, and it's led to results. I mean, we're doing cool things now at Nielsen. We just introduced mobile measurement. We're the first people in the industry to do census-based mobile measurement on mobile apps, on desktop, and we're not doing it through panels. And Nielsen started out with panel-based measurement, and for Nielsen, the company that started panel-based measurement, to actually be the first people to do mobile measurement, I mean, that's really innovative.
Yeah.
We're doing programmatic. I mean, Nielsen's doing programmatic. I think a few years ago, no one, would have thought we would have been putting our data in programmatic exchanges. Yeah. So that stuff's cool and exciting.
Yeah, I want to come back to this idea of finding it and pushing it in others. But Susan, I think this is actually a good time to show your prompts.
Excellent.
Just about innovation.
Well, so I was thinking about this last night, and again, I think I said earlier that I'm a pretty visual person. And we're all doing a lot of talking, brilliant talking, I must say, panelists. I wanted to show you something that I think really encapsulates the idea of innovation and inspiration. So these are Bose noise-canceling headphones, and they work wonderfully well. I wear them on planes sometimes when I want to listen to nothing. They actually do cancel out all the noise, and you can sleep. They're great. These are Beats headphones. And so, to me, this is innovation. Surely, technological innovation, they're fantastic. They sound great. But this is inspiration, because Dr. Dre and Jimmy Iovine looked at, first of all, they know the business of music, and they cared about how you experience digital music in the best possible way. But they looked at Apple, and they looked at why people find those products lust-worthy, why they look at them and sort of badge themselves and line up outside the door. And they made them shiny and pretty and fantastic. And so, they sold that company. They sold Beats by Dr. Dre for a great deal of money to Apple. I'm sure the Bose company continues to do well. But so to me, this is a perfect visual metaphor for innovation, sure, but this is inspiration, and it comes from observation, from thinking differently, from looking at what other people do well, and how do you borrow? You can be a borrower and still be very creative. So I think I hope you take that idea, that image home in your mind, because I think it really does encapsulate it. These are way cooler. I'd put them on, but I'd
you don't work for Beats.
I do not. I don't.
I'm curious what you thought. To anyone can chime in.
Yeah.
What the sort of insight was that Beats maybe had, right? Because Bose is a fantastic product.
Yep.
I use them frequently. Was it, hey, we need to make something cooler? Because so much of this business that we are all in, especially today, is data driven, right? It's big data, making decisions based upon data. That's great and wonderful, and I do it in my organization every day, but that only goes so far. You need to have the raw gut creative inspiration and innovation. So whether this example or others that people have, how do you draw from what the data, what that says, and the inspiration?
I think it's the marriage of both. I mean, I think this is the marriage of technology. These are excellent headphones, right? But it's also the marriage of the design. And I think that is inside of an Apple computer better than what's inside of a You know, other kind of computer, probably not. Maybe not even as good. But the design is beautiful. And I think that our businesses, and I've been in the advertising business before this time, we go on these pendulum swings of it's all about creative, it's all about data, it's all about, you know, it's kind of schizo. When it's actually, it's the marriage of art and science. It's the psychotherapist also with the art of who's the right person. So I think you have to have both.
Yeah, I think Coleen might have something to say about it.
So I love that. I think it is the marriage of the two, and then said a different way, looking at it from a different perspective. I think what the second example, the inspiration, really tapped into was all the different senses. So it wasn't just the sound of the Bose, and it was the look, it was the feel, it's that beautiful design, it's that smooth touch of the silicone. So they really did a better job in terms of tapping into all the different senses, the visual, that I think really gets consumers passionate and excited. And that's where the value is created.
No, and I was just going to add, I mean, it's...
I borrow these.
I don't know all of that. You know, it was taking something that obviously, first and foremost, serves a functional purpose, but the insight that people are wearing them on their heads, and it's like fashion, it's wearable technology, so bringing a whole different degree of design and coolness that, you know, this is a badge for people, and it says something about them, so they just basically transcended this category to, you know, fashion and wearable technology.
But there's some psychology in there too, because we all want to be individual, right? And there's something about those headphones that you can absolutely personalize the color, that all the various pieces. But we're also tribal. We like to belong. We like to feel that we belong as much as we want to be individuals. So belonging in the set of people that wear those headphones immediately makes us feel, and often we are perceived to be, a different kind of person. So seeing Susan wearing those on a flight on the way to London, I may perceive her in that split second slightly differently to if I saw her wearing her Bose, or both.
Or both, right?
Yeah.
Take you out.
Yeah, that, you know, I think that wanting to belong to a tribe, to a community of sorts is incredibly powerful. And frankly, I think that's why the real power of social media is that creating of community. And it does say something about you if you're wearing the Bose or if you're wearing the Beats. But what does it say? I mean, we have a perception of what it might be, but is there actually, you know, is it too surface?
Well, I would argue yes, but only because of where I come from. I would be fascinated as to why someone felt the need, if that was the case, to belong. And equally, someone that was wearing a brand that they bought for $9 in the market would equally tell me something that could be equally as fascinating, because they may be more individual. So,
right. And
it doesn't actually matter. The answer doesn't matter, but I think it's interesting to look at our behavior around some of those things. And as marketers, I think that understanding that consumer behavior and the psychology of it is equally interesting. And that all leads back to the original inspiration and innovation in the very first place.
So part of where I'm going with this is sort of thinking about a physical space of a work environment. Right, I think someone mentioned earlier the open desk. I purposely don't, you know, have an office and want to be with people. Does that make a difference?
Oh, yeah, absolutely. It does. And some people love it. Some people want to run out of the building screaming. But we have started to have open plan on some of our floors. And we gave employees, you know, a budget, and they could choose their own headphones and personalize it, and that got them sort of very excited. So there's a way to do it, and there are, you know, different types of accounts and things that it may be better for, or different sorts of functions. You know, it's not terribly great for HR or finance, but in terms of the planners and the researchers to be able to collaborate and work together, I think it does work.
So, and I see a lot of nodding heads. Lynda, I'm curious because I wrote these two things down. Productive paranoia and...
You're not going to let me regret I said that.
Comfort in being uncomfortable. Mm-hmm. And yet a, you know, open floor plan or whatever it is, it's fostering collaboration and discussions. Is that in conflict with productive paranoia?
No, it's not, because you need both. First, you have to stimulate the thinking, and the productive paranoia stimulates the thinking, and then you have to take that thinking and turn it into action and results, and you can only do that by collaborating. And that's why it's hard. It's really hard in a big company. I think we've all been in big companies. People often talk about innovation, starting a startup and doing something, on your own. I think in some ways that's much easier than driving change in a big company. I think we're all nodding because we've been doing it for a long time. And I think, the really, big-time innovators are people that can drive change in a big company. And I think all the things that we're talking about are ways to do it.
Yeah. So building this as function, I want to take that idea of a startup. BuzzFeed is still a startup, although less of a startup than it used to be. And this idea of culture in physical space, can it be forced? I wonder if the audience, you don't have to raise your hand if your boss is sitting next to you, but you sometimes feel that it's forced. And, this whole idea of innovation and inspiration, they're trying to force it upon you. But at the end of the day, your goals and your success and maybe even your compensation is based upon traditional metrics. Do we need to rethink the way that we incentivize people?
I don't know if we need to rethink it entirely. I think we can make an adjustment. And I do think that, and maybe Kathleen can confirm or deny it, but, human beings respond to rewards or consequences, both positive and negative. So I think it's a great idea if there is upside for being more creative, and if you can create that room for people to fail, because you need to fail a couple of times on projects before you have the real breakthrough.
I think it's about congruency, because I think if you think about the campuses at Palo Alto for Facebook or indeed Google, I know where you came from, Jonathan, and some of the businesses that are well known for having very creative spaces. On one hand, how amazing, what a fantastic environment to be within, but equally, you do know there's a theory behind that, which is keeping them on campus for longer, so you feed them and they have their dry cleaning done and all that kind of stuff. And there is a cynical take on that, which is it's just getting more productivity out of their people. You can read it both ways. I think the congruency comes from being very upfront about that may be one of the motivations, as well as a great creative environment to foster inspiration. So I think it's about declaring both intents rather than sugarcoating, isn't it great we've got a sweet shop? Well, it is great we've got a sweet shop, but I hope you've got a dentist on site too. So I think there's two sides to those environments. But do we see greater collaboration? Do we see very positive, very loyal behaviours coming out of those businesses? We absolutely do. So something is working.
And, we've been doing some work at Nielsen on what makes people happy at work. We're a company that collects information about data and consumer behavior, and what that data is showing, and I don't think we've published all this data yet, is that it's actually not money that makes people happy. It's that people feel they have a purpose, that when they go to work every day, they are making some kind of a difference. And I think when people feel disconnected from the work environment, that's when they stop innovating, they stop inspiring, and they just feel like they're sort of a cog in a wheel, just punching a clock every day. And so it's a responsibility of leadership to be able to drive that and to drive the culture that's not going to make people feel that way. And it's actually not money. I think first, money is a byproduct of that. I think it's making people feel like they're part of a team and making a difference.
At the Lighthouse, we do a survey every year of sort of 500 chief executives, and we talk about what keeps you in your job. And money is I think, ranks at 4th or 5th. Purpose and their ultimate leader are the two things that keep them most in the businesses that they're in.
So I want to, in the few minutes we have left, want to talk about leadership and driving this idea of inspiration and innovation. Specifically across organizations, which we've talked about, or generally with organizations, specifically for people, and people that either report directly to you or people not in your function at all who look to you as a mentor. It seems to me it's not formulaic. A lot of what we've talked about is it's very specific. So how do you advise someone? How do you talk to a direct report about getting to that next level, finding that inspiration? Is there a method you go by? Is it feel? I'm curious how you all do it.
So I know when new or young folks come to me and seek me out at our company and ask, what types of things should I be thinking about? I say, raise your hand. Raise your hand for anything. Raise your hand for a new business pitch. You will learn so much. You will get close to the senior management of the company and learn how they think and learn what they think is important and how they prioritize. And so it's really about continually putting yourself out there, trying new things, and being open to that.
Open. Lynda?
Yeah, I mean, I said earlier, I really do thrive so much on people's successes, and an interesting thing happens when people really sense that and believe that, is that they, I find, become incredibly disarmed and open to feedback. And because it's in such a constructive, with the desire to make them succeed and do their best. So I feel that honesty, I think, is critical. And again, if it comes from a good place from your heart, it's really well received. So, and then I think just having, good instincts and insights about people. People, no one's perfect. People have strengths, weaknesses. And I also find it's particularly challenging as people are pretty senior because, A, their styles are very developed. So it becomes particularly difficult for them to change how they've always done things, and also tends to align with who they are as people in their personal life. So I find often that if I'm bringing up something, they'll say, oh, I have that issue at home with my husband or my, whatever. So, I think it's very important to give people very clear feedback and do everything to help them, get to that next level.
In honesty.
But while you give feedback, I think it's also important to create a framework that people can think independently and not be sort of prescriptive. And it's very easy to be prescriptive. It's much harder to get people to think. And we have our CEO at Nielsen, Mitch Barnes. I mean, he's sort of an inspirational leader to me. I was doing a very difficult negotiation a few months ago. One of my responsibilities is to negotiate a lot of our measurement relationships with a lot of the big media companies. And it was difficult, and I wasn't sure what to do. And so I called him. I said, what should I do? I'm in this negotiation. What should I do? And I wanted him to give me an answer. And he didn't. He said, there are 4 principles that I want you to think about, and approaching this negotiation. He said, I'm not going to tell you the answer. I want you to sleep on it for the weekend, and then whatever answer you come up with is going to be the right answer because I believe in you. And I was tormented all weekend. I couldn't figure out what to do. I said, damn it, I wish he had told me the answer, but I was happier at the end of the day that he was willing to sort of say, you come up with the answer.
In pushing your thinking. Mm-hmm. I'm curious, I want to get to you too, but I'm curious how much you take from your past experience of someone else as a leader or a boss to you, and how you sort of engender that on others. Susan?
Yeah, no, I mean, I think I've been very fortunate in that I've had some pretty amazing mentors, and a pretty wide gamut from, sort of John Wren to Bono. I mean, they're like talk about two things that are not like the other. But you take something from everybody, good and bad, right? So I've also worked for people that were psychotic, and so you don't want to be that. You don't want to be the screamer. I'm not a screamer. The thing I learned from John Wren was to wait. Was that you don't have to rush in and fix everything the second that somebody brings it to you. That sometimes letting things sit for a bit and they just work themselves out often. And I think the thing I learned from Bono was, there are 2 things. One is to really think about the unintended consequences of things, because he's so well known that you have to think about what would anything mean to all of the aspects that he is. And the other thing was to make sure that there's a melody line. So, because I think that when you're in marketing and branding and all these things that I do, oftentimes they can be very disjointed, especially as media becomes so fragmented. So what's the melody line? What's the consistent thing that always goes through it? And I think you take those things and then you add some of your own pieces. And I think the other thing that's very important is that it's authentic, right? You can't read books and go to seminars and then act like that person. Everybody smells it. It's weird. And so I think you have to actually be what you tell your team that you are, or what you expect of them. You have to be very authentic and really walk the walk.
Kathleen?
So 4 things. I always say dream big, go as big as you possibly can. You have to be brave enough and curious enough to believe that you can genuinely do and be whatever you want to be. I agree with Coleen, put your hand up for extracurricular activity. I'm always looking when I'm headhunting for other things that you do for this business, not just your business. I'm very interested in that. I think the honest feedback, Lynda, absolutely, and you have to be ready to accept it, and it's always painful, no matter how well meant or constructed, but actually it's one of the most wonderful gifts somebody can give you to say, actually, you need to be working a little harder on this. And the last thing I would say for all of these things, particularly the inspiration side, sleep on it. Having the gap to sleep on something, it is amazing what happens in the morning.
Well, I promised we would end on time, and we are almost there. I want to first thank you all for coming. It's fulfilled one of my dreams as being a talk show host, so thank you. And to thank our panelists for some really interesting insights. Thank you. Thank you very much.
Thank you. And look at the clock, he's bang on time. You could do this, Jonathan.